Hello and welcome to Indy Talks, a monthly interview show brought to you by the Hudson Independent, which is the most trusted source of local news in the river towns. I'm Barrett Seaman. My guest today is Louis Vettrone, who is, I guess the simplest way to see, he's the Deputy Commissioner of the Department of Environmental Facilities, correct?
That's correct, yeah.
Maybe it's simplest to call you the recycling czar
Okay,
of Westchester
okay.
County. Is that fair?
I don't know if that's fair, but I've a lot of what I do is recycling based. Yes,
Right.
yes.
You've been at this job for 9 years now,
Yep, about 9 years.
and how has the recycling in Westchester changed over that time? Can you claim?
Oh yeah, sure. I mean, it's changed tremendously. When I first came over to the Department of Environmental Facilities almost 10 years ago, at that time the county was, as far as plastics recycling, we were only recycling plastics 1 and 2.
Right.
So if you remember, you had to, each item, it was very frustrating. You had to pick up that item,
Look at the
yes,
little
try to
number.
find the little triangle in the back, and hold it up to the light and see if it was a plastic coated 1 or 2. Because, well, first of all, they were the most marketable, but at that time, our material recovery facility, which is in Yonkers, our MRF was all human labor. So it was just, we had workers separating every material by hand. So to be able to separate 1s through 7s would have been an impossible task at that point. So right around that time was when we were looking to expand the county's recycling program. So the first step was retrofitting the MRF. And in that retrofit was completed around 2011, 2012. We expanded the capabilities of the MRF so that it could handle all plastics. That was done, we put in optical sorters. So the way optical sorters work, they basically shoot infrared light, lasers through the plastic. They read the thickness of the material. That's what those numbers relate to, the thickness of the plastic, basically. And then they're able to separate them out into the separate boxes. On the paper side, in Westchester, we're dual stream, so we separate paper and cardboard, and we separate our commingled recyclables, glass, plastics, and metals. On the paper side, we put in screeners and other automation that helps separate paper and cardboard and make a cleaner product. Because of all those advancements, we were able to expand the source separation law. So now it's the law in Westchester to recycle all your plastics. The other thing we did about 10 years ago was we were one of the first in the whole Northeast to institute recycling enforcement. So we put together an enforcement division within the Department of Environmental Facilities that the inspectors go around and they inspect waste generators. So those are businesses throughout the county, and schools and institutions, colleges, hospitals, to make sure they're recycling correctly. But they also watch the haulers to make sure that they're collecting the material separately in the way they're supposed to. When we instituted recycling enforcement, within 1 year, recycling went up 18%. So that had a tremendous impact throughout the county. And at first, it was a little controversial. People said, you're going to write tickets about recycling.
Yeah.
That's exactly what we did. But now no one even thinks about it. The inspectors come in and they say they're doing a recycling inspection, and the owners show them how they separate out the materials. And it really just reinforces the right way to handle the material for everyone. So those were the two big changes at that time, and the law was changed to match up with what we were doing. So the Board of Legislators expanded the source separation law to require residents and businesses to recycle more plastics, and we've added many other items over the years as well.
You mentioned the processors, educating the processors about it, and also the large entities, schools, et cetera, who do that. But what about just your average consumer who puts the little baskets out on How do you educate them, and how has that gone?
Well, well, I'll give you the good news first. The good news is Westchester residents do a great job of recycling. We hit 50% recycling rate. I don't love recycling rate as a measure of performance, but you know, that being said, we have a 50% recycling rate, which is one of the most robust in the whole region. So they do a good job separating it. But the challenge is always public education,
right,
and reinforcing the right way to do things. There's been a dramatic change in the recycling market over the past year and a half that we can talk about. But because of that change in the market, it's become even more incumbent upon us over the past year and a half to put a lot of stress on re-educating and reinforcing how to recycle right. So we're kicking off a new Recycle Right campaign in Westchester County. And what does Recycle Right mean? Recycle Right means putting the only items that are recyclable, first of all, in the recycling containers. There's a lot of wish cycling that goes on, and wish cycling is putting the thing in you think we should be recycling, and maybe we should, but putting that item in the basket when you think, well, they should be doing curd cups, you know, so I'm going to throw them in. Trying to put an end to wish cycling, so we only have the items that are supposed to go in the bins going in the right bins. But then also, we're doing a real big push on reducing contamination. Because the market has become very constricted, the recycling market and the resale market, it's much harder to sell and move material. Because of that, we have to reduce contamination as much as possible to make it to make it a very attractive product, right? So that's the other part of this recycling campaign, is to clean your recyclables, to do it right, to make sure they're packaged right, their tape is removed if you can off of boxes, make sure the food is not in the pizza box. So the least amount of contamination we can have, the better. But that's always our challenge, is getting the message out. So we're doing a big campaign now, and another thing that's changed since I started is now the availability of social media. So now we're trying to utilize those tools to also get the message out there. So we're using Facebook, and the county, you know, has Instagram now, and we're making videos and we're putting them on YouTube, and whatever we can do to help get the word out there. And we also, you know, we're putting together. The other thing we did is we put together much more user-friendly materials. Over the last 10 years, we kept adding things on and adding things on. It was always text, and people want it simple. So we've switched over to like children's picture books. It's all photos of everything that you put in each container, and it's much more effective. It's been shown, you know, in other parts of the country to use materials like that, and that's what we're moving to. You know, more graphics and less text, and just, you know, people want to look at a brochure, right, and say, this is what I put in this bin, this is what I put in that bin. Keep it as simple as possible.
Right. You said there was a dramatic change in the market in the past year or so.
Yeah.
What caused that change?
So about a year and a little over a year ago, almost a year and a half ago, China was historically the big driver in the recyclables market. They bought most of the world's recycling. And in late 2017, as part of their national sword policy, they put very, very hard to meet contamination restrictions on the import of recyclables. They banned the import of certain recyclables, and then they put these contamination restrictions, contamination limits on others that virtually operated as a ban because they were so hard to meet. And they did this for very legitimate reasons. They have over 1 billion people, and they're out buying the world's recyclables. The idea is, why don't we, you know, foster our own recycling program here in our own country? We have all this material. We don't need to purchase this material. Let's build an infrastructure to collect our own material and turn it into new items.
I wonder if it's happened in the last year. Was there a geopolitical element to this thing? Was it in retaliation as part of the tariffs?
Well, that's part of it. They're definitely, this happened before or when I guess the beginning of the tariff war was being discussed. But there is an element of that to it, we believe. But a lot of it was to, as I said, to foster their own recycling program and to bring it up to speed. So because of that, it had a dramatic effect on the resale market for recyclables. Other countries tried to step in, some named Vietnam, Malaysia, India,
To buy our recycling.
to buy recycling and to develop their own recycling markets. But they just became inundated with material, and now, in the middle of last year, those countries began putting their own restrictions, contamination restrictions. They didn't want to become dumping grounds for the world's recyclables and the world's garbage. So they put their own contamination restrictions in effect. But we were very lucky in Westchester. So the main message I want everybody to know is that Westchester continues to recycle everything within our refuse district, everything put out at the curb by our residents. Everything is recycled. We're not making as much money on it, selling it, but we continue to market and sell our recyclables. And we're able to do that because, number one, we're dual stream as opposed to single stream. So the dual stream is separating out the pulp recyclables, the paper and cardboard, the commingled recycles, the glass, plastic, and metal. That keeps your material much cleaner than single stream. Over the past 10 years, many, if not most jurisdictions moved over to single stream, where you put all your recycling into the same container. Single stream can contaminate recycling because the glass breaks and the glass shards become embedded in the cardboard and the newspaper, reduce the value of those recyclables. But the residual liquids and food also reduce the value of the other recyclables. So dual stream's cleaner. But also, because we were talking about that retrofit of the MRF going on 7 years ago now, the MRF is, with the optical sorters and the paper screeners with the state-of-the-art equipment, is able to remove more contaminated material than many other MRFs that are all manual. We still have quality control people and pickers along the lines, but the automation is able to help remove a lot more of the contamination. Because of that, we've been able to take advantage of the very few the domestic market's growing now, and because of this
The domestic market for the recycled material.
right, which, you know, there are plants coming up online over the past year since the whole incident, since China pulled out of the market. But we've always been able to take advantage of the domestic markets because we have this clean material and this clean product. So we weren't hit as hard as many others. You may have seen these articles that have appeared in the Atlantic Monthly, the New York Times, and there's a lot of media coverage. A lot of jurisdictions, municipalities throughout the country have suspended their recycling programs because of this. They're not able to move their material. And luckily, because we have a clean material, because Westchester's residents do a great job separating out the material, we've been able to continue to market and sell our recyclables.
Yeah. Well, I would think that, you know, if the Chinese, they weren't taking it out of the goodness of their hearts, or the Vietnamese,
Right. Yes.
they were actually using it. So is there anything we learned from or can learn from the Chinese, the Vietnamese, others who were taking it in bulk?
Well, I think it's forced us to take a hard look at our recycling programs, and a lot of jurisdictions are looking at there's some, you know, existential questions about recycling, and I've seen articles, is it worth it? And I believe it's very much worth it for the environmental benefits, obviously, and also it can be worth it financially too if we have a robust recycling program. But we're taking a hard look at, you know, which items we want to focus on, what type of equipment. There's now a lot of talk about reinvesting in MRFs so that we can focus on the most advantageous recyclables. So by that I mean the ones that are the best to recycle, that make the most sense to recycle. And maybe we'll see a paring down of items at some point. I don't think we'll see that in Westchester. I think we're still trying to expand the amount of items we can pull out of our waste stream. But, you know, jurisdictions are taking a look at whether they should focus on particular items within the recycling stream. You know, we're looking at ways to reduce contamination, and that's a good thing. You know, we're looking at how we can make the cleanest material, and then the cleaner material is going to be made into higher grade materials down the road anyway.
Right.
So that's a good thing as well. So I think, you know, there's going to be a lot of growing pains now, and we're going to have to watch as the U.S. market, U.S. develops its own recycling market, or expands, I should say. It has a recycling market, but we expand our domestic recycling market. You know, as that happens, we need to look at ways to be more efficient with recycling, and that's part of that Recycle Right program.
Yeah. What's the most profitable piece of recycled material? Is it paper? Is it metal?
Oh, the most, well, I mean, I think you look at different items. Used to, for a while, we made a lot of money on cardboard, and now the cardboard market has come down a lot. Obviously, certain metals are going to be more valuable. You know, really, as far as plastics, it's still those plastics 1 and 2 that are the most valuable. But you know, there's also we're able to, because we have those optical sorters, we're able to play the market a little bit. So when 5s come up in value and there's a lack of 5s on the market, we can kind of focus on separating out those materials as well. So you know, the answers, it really depends. It depends. It's a fluctuating market, like any other. There are items that are always more valuable. I can tell you the least valuable, though. That's the easy thing.
And what's that?
The least valuable are those plastics down at the other end of the spectrum.
The 7s.
Those, yeah, the hard, rigid plastics. We still separate them out. We still bale them. We still sell them. But you know, you're talking about selling them for pennies. But our goal is to make sure they're recycled. Could we make more money if we reduced the amount of recyclables and focused on only the valuable ones again? Yeah, we could make more money and be more profitable, but that's not really the point, right? We want to be able to, because we're making money on the more valuable recyclables, use that money to be able to recycle the less valuable material. Glass is the least. Now, we're talking about glass is not a very valuable recyclable, especially in this area. In areas where glass can be used more in construction and roadway projects and be more valuable, but glass, there's an expense to recycling glass.
So that's a losing proposition then.
It's a losing proposition. Obviously, there's an environmental benefit to it, but financially, it's a losing venture. And on the paper and cardboard side, it's the material that's already been recycled. So that gray cardboard, like a shoebox, or something, that's not very valuable.
Yeah, how many times can you go through the cycle before you got?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't even know what we make that chipboard into.
Yeah.
But is it still recycled? Yeah, it's still recycled. But eventually, it's going to come to the end of its useful life.
Right. What's going on in terms of the engineering and the science? Are there things out there that are changing the dynamics of the market and making you look at things a little differently?
Yeah, well,
Different sorting. I mean, you've got the sorting devices, but there are all kinds of factors that go in.
sure. I mean, it's not so much the sorting equipment, because as far as the sorting equipment, we're pretty much at state of the art still with the retrofit we did recently. It's the equipment that's able to pull different materials out of the recycling, out of the stream. One thing we did recently, which is old school, we do it hand-picked, is we expanded our recycling to pull out cartons. But that's because the ability to recycle that material has expanded for the recyclers. For us, it's not so much any new advances that allow us to pull the material out, but we have pickers who go in and they take out gable tops, so your milk containers, your juice containers, those materials now, ice cream containers, they're now taken out of the waste stream, And we're able to sell those materials because now the recycling market for those has expanded.
You talking about the stuff with the wax around them, like my ice cream?
Yep,
container?
yep, exactly.
I always wonder, does this go into the paper thing, or?
Well, here we're a little different in Westchester. Most municipalities will have you put it in with your commingled, with your other bottles and cans. I'm sorry, most will have you put it in with your paper, because it's got cardboard in it. But here in Westchester, we have you put it in with the commingled, with the bottles and cans, because we don't want the residual liquid to contaminate the paper and cardboard. So in Westchester, we have you put the containers in with your other bottles and cans. But really, the new advancements, what we're looking at is what we can do to pull more material out of the waste stream. So really the next frontier in recycling is food waste. And we kicked off a comprehensive food waste study in February in the county that is designed to, first of all, identify what we can feasibly divert from the residential food waste stream and from the commercial food waste stream. For, you know, the first option is always food rescue, which is, you know, salvaging food that can be that you can take and get to people in need.
Whole Big Macs that you.
well, there are organizations like Rock and Wrap It Up and other organizations that they rescue food that's been made for events, for rock concerts and sporting events and things that hasn't been used, and they can get it, you know, within a very short amount of time to people in need. So that's always your first line of defense. But the food waste study is then going to, the goal is to identify the amount of food scraps that we can reasonably divert from the residential and commercial food waste streams, from the waste streams, to recycle. And then it's going to look at all the available technologies. It's going to look at your old school, tried and tested technologies like composting. We're going to look at excess capacity in the anaerobic digesters at the county's wastewater treatment plants. And then we're also going to look at the possibility of standalone food waste digesters in Westchester County. And
which would be just in individual towns where you'd have a thing, you just chuck it in there?
It could be towns, it could be regional. That's part of the study, to figure out how many of these sites we'd need to handle the amount of food waste in the county. And then it's going to look at it, though, through Westchester's eyes. So, you know, what works here as far as the landscape we have, because Westchester's pretty diverse, right? We have urban, we have suburban, and we have rural. So, you know, maybe it's that we can do composting in some areas, and where we have more population density, we'll have to look at the wastewater treatment plants or a standalone food waste digester. So the study is designed to look at all those things, to look at it through Westchester's eyes and see what would work here, then make recommendations that can be implemented by the county.
Right. The county recently gave out some awards, right?
That's right, yesterday.
To communities for their achievements.
Yeah.
As I remember those, some of those were for rates, right? I mean,
curbside recycling rates. Yes,
okay.
yes.
Curbside's disparaging the idea.
Well, I can tell you what. As far as a countywide recycling rate, I don't mean to disparage. I'm very proud of our recycling rate and that we have such a high recycling rate. But the recycling rate, there's a lot of things that go into it that are variable, that are out of our control. So, for example, several years ago, they were building the Ridge Hill complex in Yonkers.
Right.
Massive complex, right? It has residential, it has commercial retail stores, it has a gym, it has a movie theater, restaurants, it has everything, right?
It's like a Disney studio that just sort of
it's massive. So when they were building that, they were taking massive amounts, incredible tonnage of rock and dirt, virgin rock and dirt, out of the ground, and reusing it on site and in other construction projects. Well, that counts as recycling. You're recycling the rock and dirt. So that year we had a very high.
Baskets, though, outside your house.
No, we had a very high recycling rate, 64%. So all the media outlets want to call me up and say, "Wow, you did such a great job. It's 64. You know, what did Westchester do right? You know, so great this year." But then the next year, when we're back down to 50%, which is a fantastic recycling rate, why did everybody in Westchester stop recycling? But when you look at curbside recycling rate, which
Right.
is what we gave the awards out for, you get a much truer picture, because
Right.
curbside's what your residents are putting out at the curb.
Right.
So that, yeah, we had our second annual Eco Awards at Kensico Dam Plaza, and County Executive George Latimer was there. We're very happy to have him to hand out the awards to schools and students and municipalities and businesses throughout the county that have gone above and beyond and really contributed to Westchester's environment. So there were, you're alluding to 3 municipalities had the highest curbside recycling rates. I think Pound Ridge, I think this year had the highest.
Right.
The highest rate at 41%, which is pretty remarkable when you think of that's just what's put curbside, not counting the rock and dirt or asphalt millings or even other heavy items like leaves. Leaves are recyclable. We take them up to compost sites outside of the county, but they're composted. So when you don't count those items and you look just at curbside, that's a very impressive recycling.
So what did Pound Ridge do that made them so efficient?
Well, I think they're a community that's very progressive, and they do a great job getting the message out and educating their residents on how to recycle. Now, their recycling rate is generally going to be a little bit higher because I believe they are single stream. So single stream is easier as a resident, and your recycling rate is going to be a little higher. They might not get. Now, they're outside of the county's refuse district. There's 7 towns that are not part of the county's refuse disposal district. Although they might have more recyclables, they may not, their hauler, now they hire, it's a little different setup. They have, I believe they have a private hauler, so that hauler may not get the same amount of down the road amount of revenue for those recyclables. But they do a great, not to disparage the job they do a great job recycling.
So our market is the river towns, Sleepy Hollow, Tarrytown, Irvington, Dobbsbury.
All part of the district.
All part of this. How they do?
The river towns do very well, actually. They're some of the best performers in the county. They also do a great job with their websites, updating their websites, and helping the county get the word out on any county initiatives and their own initiatives that they have. We work very closely with all the municipalities inside and outside of the district because we're the planning unit for the whole county. But we work particularly closely with the municipalities inside the district, and the river towns do a fantastic job of educating their residents and also have some of the highest recycling rates.
Right. Good. So this new education program that's launching now, or going to be launched, what can our viewers expect to see and learn from it?
So we already have a series of videos the county's put out, and they're available on the county's Facebook site. But we also we're going to have new printed materials that are going to go out to all the municipalities, all the municipalities throughout the county, to post on their websites, make available at events that, as I said, they're going to be much more user-friendly. So they're going to be graphics that demonstrate exactly what goes into each bin. They're going to stress not to put your recyclables in plastic bags. Plastic bags are the bane of any material recovery facility. And
they're all out in the ocean being eaten by whales.
That's true. A lot of them do end up there. So there's going to be a lot more material on that. We have some stories that have come out in the Journal News recently, explaining what Recycle Right is, and to basically, there's going to be much more of an emphasis on getting the right materials in the right container, not putting superfluous materials, extra materials in there, only the materials that should be recycled.
Louis Vettrone, thank you for coming on the show. I'm not sure this part will make it onto the show, but in any event, I thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.